Hey Wild Ducks. Welcome to our technology podcast. It's my pleasure to introduce the avatar of your host, Jerry Cuomo.
Thank you, RJ. And welcome back, folks, to the Wild Ducks podcast. Today we have part 2 of Jerry's interview with Ken Kocienda. Previously, Ken shared his experiences at Apple, inventing iPhone's autocorrect and helping shape groundbreaking features. In part 2, they explore AI's potential, enterprise applications, and creating trustworthy tech beyond the black box. Without further ado, let's rejoin Ken and Jerry.
Okay, we're back with Ken, and let's get going. And folks, if you haven't seen part 1, please go back and watch part 1. You will be thrilled. Ken talks about his time at Apple and some of the great discoveries like autocorrect that he came upon during his work. But let's move forward here, Ken, if you don't mind. Let's talk about the post-Apple years, and you've had some amazing time since Apple. So, yeah, in fact, just to make sure we hit on some of these, you were a principal software engineer focusing and doing some work around robotics, I hear, with Postmates, distinguished engineer at Airbnb. You spent some time with Humane, right, heading their product engineering, and you are now the founder of a company called Infactory. So please start wherever you want, but post-Apple, fill us in.
Well, I had a very, very good time at Apple. I stayed for almost 16 years. And in 2017, I decided that it was time to start doing something else, to see what else I could do. And so right after that, I didn't know exactly what I was going to be, but an acquaintance of mine wrote a book called Radical Candor, which maybe you've heard of, Kim Scott.
Sure.
She introduced me to her editor. So I went and I wound up writing a book about my Apple experiences, creative selection. And so that was a 1.5-year project. And then I decided to get back into software. So as you mentioned, I found a job. I was actually one of the co-founders of Postmates. Bastian Lehman read my book and invited me in for a conversation. And he said, well, what do you want to do? Is there anything at the company you want to do? I said, well, there's this robotics project you're doing. So I worked on sidewalk delivery robots for about a year. And then it was Brian Chesky, the founder, one of the co-founders of Airbnb, got in touch. He read my book as well. And said, well, why don't you come over and work at Airbnb? We'll figure out. Well, I don't even know what you're going to do. We'll figure something out.
Okay.
Which is a very, very kind offer that he made.
That's a great job.
But then just a couple of, literally 3 weeks after that, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And so it was, a challenging time for everyone. It was a challenging time for Brian to figure out how, a company that was based on people going around was how he was going to keep the company going, which of course he figured out how to do brilliantly. Of course, it's because it's Brian; he does things brilliantly. But then I decided that I was going to do something else, so I went and made an iOS word game as my pandemic project. It's called Upspell. It's still out on the App Store. You can get it for free.
Yeah.
But then at the end of 2020, an old colleague from Apple got in touch, Imran Chaudhry, and he and his wife, Bethany Bongiorno, founded this company called Humane to make AI hardware.
Oh, I see.
And so I joined them and worked at Humane for over 3 years to make the product that is now available. It's called the AI Pin. It was a very, very interesting time to try to come up with new software for this new hardware. And what I learned during the time there is that there is a huge amount of opportunity to do new work in the field of AI. And so with someone that I met at Humane, Brooke Hartley-Moy, she and I went and founded a company to start looking at some of these, one aspect in particular, which is how do you use AI to get reliable facts?
Yes.
And so we have a company now, Infactory, and that's what I'm focused on. and trying to do good work in the field of AI.
So off-the-shelf AI, let's call it, like models like GPT-4 and Perplexity AI and chatbots that the masses use. Where do you see, if you can, their shortcomings, around fact-based, grounded responses? And then tell us some of the things and ideas about what you're doing to mitigate those.
Yeah, I'm an AI optimist. So
yes.
I think
here,
that the work of the people that you mentioned is incredible, and is inspiring, and so I think the issue comes down to I look at it as a software developer who has done decades of work before the advent of AI. And so what I see is that these, a lot of the popular services, you type some text in and there is this big black box and that text rattles around in there and you don't know how, and then an answer comes out. And so when the answer is right, terrific. But when it isn't, how do you debug that? How do you introspect that? How do you fix that error that the system got things wrong? And that to me is the main shortcoming with AI as it exists now. It's very, very difficult to understand that machine that is sitting in between your question and your answer.
That's right.
And so the work that we're doing at Infactory is to open that up, to add some more steps and some more connections that can be understood. That there are more API layers. There are more links in the chain going between your question and your answer, so that we can understand and develop and engineer each of those steps. To give more reliable answers.
Yeah, and I've always been intrigued in working with large language models. These magic phrases like think step by step. So rather than having the large language model give you an answer, say, don't give me an answer, give me the steps to the answer. And then seeing the revelation. And in the earlier days when these models struggled with math, that was one of the sure shot ways to get them to do math right, which is almost like, someone in the 5th grade, show me your work. And then maybe you'll learn something about it. And I'm always intrigued by those magic phrases. But it's also inspiring to say that, I like the way you put it, bouncing around in the black box. Have it come out of the black box every once in a while and report back on what it's thinking. And I think those, to me, are signs toward trustworthiness.
Yeah, it is also, a matter of trying to get determinism. And large language models, obviously the way that they work, they are predicated on probabilities.
Right.
And sort of the magic of it is that here I am talking to you. Somehow 2 or 3 sentences from now, I'm going to have some words come out. But, 2 or 3 sentences ago, I didn't know what those words were going to be exactly. But there they are when I get there. And, I think of that as, the way that large language models work. I mean, somehow there's some biological system that's going on with me. Well, in LLMs, it's a probabilistic system. Right. Okay, so now what can we do to sort of harness that amazing ability? But again, try to use it. And the part of our approach is that we take the amazing ability of LLMs and we shift them away from token generation at the end of the process, and focus it on understanding the data that we're going to operate over. One of our main premises is that instead of operating against the entire internet, we're going to be helping enterprise companies operate over specific data sets.
That makes a lot of sense.
So they're going to identify here, we want to ask questions about this data. Maybe it's financial data for a stock analyst company, or healthcare data for a healthcare company, or maybe ads data for any sort of retail company, whatever. And once they know that data, you can do better. You can now use the LLM and say, here, study this data. and build some structures that may help to give some, contribute to this deterministic
Makes a lot of sense,
flow.
Ken. Makes a lot. And for business, most of the world's data actually sits behind corporate firewalls, as it should. There's regulations that say it must, but that doesn't mean it can't be used to train and to provide tools. You can't fault an accountant these days for using a spreadsheet, right? So
yeah, for sure. And I think that the kinds of the chatbots and the AI enabled search engines or whatever, I look at that as just a pebble in the pond, and the ripples have not even really begun to move into the areas that they eventually will. And I think in enterprise, behind the corporate firewalls, is just one of those places where the benefits of AI have yet to reach there. And they will, and they should.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to develop some work and some tools and techniques that will help.
That sounds exciting. So Ken, with that, I mentioned your crystal ball earlier. It was one of the design projects I think you worked on at Apple. Can you take out that crystal ball again? And where is this going? Where do you see this going? I mean, even a year seems a long time from now, but how do you see this evolving, especially in the enterprise? Yeah,
so I think that the assumption will be that we're just going to be able to talk to computers. I think that now I think we all have this experience. Maybe it's at an older ATM machine at a bank. If you ever go there, if you ever need cash anymore, it's like in that odd circumstance where you do, and it's not a touch screen, and you go, there are these other buttons to the side that I need to use, right? Everybody assumes now that if it's a screen, it's a touch screen, right? And so I think that same thing is going to happen. If you see a computer system, well, I can talk to it, right? Because that's just going to become the table stakes in systems. And it's not that we're going to be getting rid of graphical user interfaces or a keyboard or mice or whatever, but that there's just going to be this opportunity to either talk to the computer or all of the programmers that I know now are using AI-enabled code editors. So you hit a command key, and now I'm typing in a prompt to help have the AI help me write the code. And that's just the way that it's going to be. It's going to be AI is going to be pervasively integrated into all of our software systems.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Well, Ken, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and best of luck. And actually, quite frankly, I love to collaborate with you. So,
well,
thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Wild Ducks. In this two-part conversation with bonafide wild duck, Ken Kocienda, we heard his stories, from creating iPhone's autocorrect at Apple, to founding Infactory, where he's building fact-based AI solutions. He reflected on lessons learned from Steve Jobs and Apple's innovation process and painted a picture of a future where computer interaction is driven by AI. If you're curious to learn more, check out Ken's book Creative Selection, offering a behind-the-scenes look at Apple's design culture. Speaking of books, Jerry also has a new release, Think Artificial Intelligence, exploring the building blocks of trustworthy AI, with all royalties benefiting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. On behalf of Jerry Cuomo, thanks for tuning in. Stay curious, and see you next time. Bye.